man, do we have a good one for you today. Thank you for tuning in to the QAD Customer Podcast. I gotta say, guys, I am really excited about this two-part series that we're doing. This episode is part of a series of podcasts that we're doing, interviews with QAD users. Our podcast is presented by Pix.Lib, a longtime partner of QAD, providing automation software for the back office. Make sure you check out the webinar series they're putting together on doclibwebinar.com. As I mentioned, super excited about this two-part series that we're bringing you guys. I am going to be interviewing Cascade Engineering's founder, Fred Keller. He's an incredible entrepreneur in the QAD space. His career is impressive, to say the least. I'm so excited to bring you this two-part series. Learn how one man started a business in a garage and grew it to a $350 million global manufacturing enterprise. Cascade Engineering is a longtime user of QAD and has effectively utilized process to scale their business. This two-part series will cover everything from green manufacturing to entrepreneurship, from a small business to medium to large enterprise, and to corporate culture. There's a whole lot of jam-packed into these two episodes. Make sure you tune in for part 2 next week. There are two key concepts that I'm going to ask Fred about here to help digest exactly how to use business to serve people. The first is going to be around how to retain an entrepreneur in a corporation and how Fred's thought about that and has been able to bring leaders into his organization and grow them over 40 years of business together. How he says, graduated other individuals out of Cascade. And I'm looking forward to you all hearing how he thinks about retaining people and especially leaders and entrepreneurs and growing them in his business.
How did you hold that tension of, building your business? It's obviously growing from 6 to 1600 or 1800 took a lot of reordering, a lot of hierarchy. How do you retain those entrepreneurial leaders that you were, back then, and kind of give them a future for what you see happening at Cascade?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there's what you do find out as an entrepreneur is that not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Many people do, and not everybody does. And there are those who want to be entrepreneurs but want to be within a business structure. So I think it's a matter of meeting people where they are and figuring out what you want to get accomplished as a business, what needs to be accomplished as a business, and what their objectives are, and trying to align them. And we have you have the wonderful successes of people who've been with you. I've had people with me for 40 years, and I have people that have been with us for just a few years and have, I call it, graduated. They found something that they really enjoy doing. An example being Mindy Asasi. Mindy was with me for about, I think, 6 years. Young, aspiring leader that wanted to move on, and she went on to work for our customer, Herman Miller, and then went to work for a major hospital. Now is back running the Welfare to Career program at the Source, which is a program that we helped to found, which is basically inspiring helping and supporting employees that work for us, and now I think it's 20 other organizations in the communities. And so I like to think of those folks as being graduates of Cascade. They've cut their teeth there. We helped. They did a great job for us, and we did some great work in helping them. And we celebrate their growth together. So it's a matter of aligning interests and supporting each other.
Secondly, we're going to talk through a approach to business that I'm going to call the Keller approach, but it is quite unique when you think about the landscape of corporate America and the various tendencies that we may have as a capitalistic nation. But without getting too political, I do want and am excited to share Keller's approach to business and how he seeks to serve communities and people instead of serving himself and simply the bottom line that is comprised of profit to the business and what business can expect to solve and affect in society in a more general way. So excited for him to break down his approach and for you to hear how he decides to approach business.
If we're truly going to have, I mean, the fact is that we have a capitalistic system now that has resulted in tremendous disparities. And these disparities can't continue. I mean, half of the Americans live basically paycheck to paycheck. They have they're basically technically insolvent. They don't have $400 in the bank. They couldn't raise $2,000 in 30 days if they had to. And this notion that a rising tide floats all boats just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We've had this experiment going on since the 50s, where that basically was the promise. Following the Second World War and the tremendous expansion of our economy during the 50s, when basically the United States was a roaring economy because of its the rest of the world was on its heels trying to just repair the damage that was done to their societies. And we were the only Western democracy that was really doing anything of any size, and the whole promise was, if we just grow our economy, everybody's going to be just fine. And it started out that way, but it hasn't really developed. If you take all of philanthropy in the world, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what the gross domestic product is of all the businesses are in the world. And it's in the same with government. It's still just a fraction of what of the power and the muscle that business has. And the notion that we have this, businesses create this little pile of junk, which then the governments and the nonprofits go to work on to solve or to fix. That just is a crazy notion. I mean, we just got to stop making the pile of junk in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's that you can find that little pile of junk in many different ways. You can do it. You can talk about human misery, or you can talk about pollution. You can talk about all the. There's a concept where people talk about all the costs that are not put into our products, and those are things like air pollution. It's free to pollute, but it causes costs elsewhere in society. And if we were to have all of those costs put into our pricing of our products, we wouldn't pollute, and we would not have those secondary costs in society. So it's just an example of how a business can, in fact, work without these additional costs being put on society. We just have to figure out how to do that. How you can do that voluntarily, or you can do it with regulation. there was an article, I don't know if you ran across it on Inc. magazine, that the title of it was "Regulate Me." I never said that, but that was the title of the article, and they could get that from what I was saying. But it's okay to regulate, because we need regulation in order for the playing ground to be level. That's why people are starting to think, well, maybe a minimum wage of $15 an hour makes sense. If everybody pays the same thing, then we're going to have a level playing field. It's when we can exploit, and so you have this concept that let me think about that. What do you call it? Do we call it the prisoner's dilemma, or do we call that where you have defectors, basically? The idea that if everybody, it's tragedy to the commons. So that if everybody is relying on a common grazing area, and they all agree that as long as they just have so many cows on that grazing area, they'll be fine. But then one farmer puts one more cow on it, and then another farmer puts another 2 cows on it, and pretty soon you've got a collapse of the grazing area, because everybody has kind of been trying to get one more cow in that grazing area. And that's the tragedy of the commons, is that we've got just so much commons to deal with, and if we continue to just take and take and take from that area, we'll have basically nothing left. And we're not on the edge of a precipice right now, but we certainly are seeing the results of what we've done. And if we don't change, we're going to, the rate of change is happening so much faster today than it was even 10 years ago, that things can happen so much faster than we think.
As I'm going through and making these voiceovers for you all, re-listening to this interview with Fred, I am just astounded with his perspective on business, and I'm super, super excited to have him as a part of this podcast. I wanted to insert here a little bit of a background on Fred, his background with his father, and the entrepreneurial spirit that is obviously evident in the way that he does business, and a little bit unique in the corporate America today, as I mentioned earlier. But very excited for you to learn a little bit more about him in the next minute or so, and also realizing I'm probably going to end up splitting this up into 3 parts because there's so much to digest. But hope you've enjoyed it so far, and here's a little background on Fred.
I was born and raised in Grand Rapids. Went to high school here, went to college at Cornell University, and undergraduate degree in material science and engineering. Spent 6 years at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft as a metallurgist, and went to night school there. Started at the University of Hartford, and then went to a night school that Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute opened up in business, and they had what they called a master's in business management at the time. But it was not an MBA per se, but same sort of subjects. And got graduated from there in '72, and moved the same year to Michigan. My father was in the tool and die business, and I set up shop next to him as the manufacturing arm of that business, and started the business in '73, and I've been growing it ever since.
Yeah, I figured it would be good to kind of take a big leap backwards here, look at the inception. I know you said you were working at Pratt & Whitney, and I think you told your father at one point that you were number 87 in line for a promotion.
Sounds like a rough guess at the time. Yes, right.
Can't believe everything you hear, but or read.
Yeah.
But so, what kind of led you to that initial step and stepping out on your own?
I grew up in a rather entrepreneurial environment. My father was always in business for himself to speak of. I mean, right after the Second World War, he opened up a manufacturing business and grew it to about 400 employees in about 10 years and sold it to a larger company and became their sales manager. And then I didn't like work doing that, so he became a partner in a aluminum foundry, and then his partner is not pulling his weight so much, so he decided to actually buy one of his clients who was absolutely bankrupt at the time in 1965 roughly, and I happened to work for the company as a tool and die company as an apprentice in the summer before he bought it. I worked for him the summer after he bought it. And that's where I coined the phrase that my father and I wouldn't want to work for my father. He wouldn't want to work for me. But then I went to school, and I graduated from school and started Pratt & Whitney. And so I just kind of grew up in that environment of my father always doing his own thing, and I kind of enjoyed that prospect, and I certainly had that in mind when I was getting my master's in business. And when the opportunity to actually, after the war, the draft finally wound down about that time, and I was able to make sure that I wasn't going to necessarily be drafted. I had a wife and a child at that point in time, so I was not anxious to be shipped off to Nam.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the opportunity of coming back to the Grand Rapids area. I learned later as a parent that your parents enjoy having your own kids around. So that was maybe a reason for them to encourage me to come back. But my dad gave me a little loan and introduced me to the banks, and that was it.
The rest is history.
Yep.
I think it's worth noting that the tool and die business he bought for $1, right?
Exactly. And,
that's crazy.
But that was because it was totally underwater. And back in those days, out of pride, he didn't take it through bankruptcy. He simply, paid the suppliers and paid everybody what they needed to be paid, and managed to increase prices and get the right business in there. The guy was a bad businessman.
Wow.
He took it over from, but he paid him a pension and was able to turn the business around. So,
wow,
that was he knew how to make a business work.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
Thanks again for tuning in today, everyone. To keep up with our series, make sure you go and subscribe to the QAD Customer Podcast. For those of you kind enough to also leave a review of our podcast, I will be sending out a series of $25 Amazon gift cards. So make sure you head over to whatever platform you consume podcasts and leave a review. Thank you all. Until next time.